As you take a deep breath and settle in, imagine yourself stepping back in time. The air is warm, thick with the fragrance of earth and life. It's a peaceful kind of heat, wrapping around you like a soft blanket, not oppressive but persistent. The sun beats down, casting long, soft shadows along the narrow streets of ancient Egypt. Picture yourself walking through them now, your feet pressing lightly against the weathered stones of the road, the dust from the bustling city swirling around your ankles. You can hear the faint murmur of voices ahead, the sounds of a civilization fully alive, yet still so distant from the world. You know that the walls of the buildings rise on either side of you, simple and strong, made of sun-baked mud bricks that have withstood centuries. You can see the faint carvings in their surfaces, images of gods, pharaohs, and animals that have long since disappeared from our time, but are so very present here. They are all around you, stories from a distant past, silently whispering their ancient truths. You pause, taking a moment to look around. The contrast is immediate and striking. Where once there were only the sounds of nature and the clatter of everyday life, today there is the constant hum of machines, the rush of cars, the hurried pace of a world that rarely stops. But here, in the heart of this ancient world, the rhythm of life is much slower, as if time itself has decided to stretch to savor each moment. As you continue walking, you begin to imagine what life was like for the people who walked these streets every day. Can you see them? The vendors selling their wares, their voices rising in a chorus of bargaining. The children running through the streets, their laughter ringing out as they play in the warmth of the day. Women carrying baskets of fruit or water from the Nile, their steps measured and purposeful. It's an ordinary day, yet extraordinary in its own way. Every moment, every movement, is a part of history. There is a certain serenity in this place, isn't there? A peacefulness that seems to fill the air and settle into your bones. As we journey deeper into this world together, let the worries of today slip away. Allow yourself to be transported fully into the heart of ancient Egypt, where every corner holds a story waiting to be told. Can you feel the hot Egyptian sun, the dust beneath your feet? As we take a walk through these ancient streets, let me know in the comments what part of Egypt you'd like to explore most as you continue down the narrow streets of this ancient world. The sounds around you grow louder, more vibrant. The hum of life fills the air, voices of merchants calling out to potential buyers, the rhythmic tapping of a craftsman's hammer on his tools, and the gentle thud of sandals on stone. There's a certain energy to the marketplace, but it's not frantic. It's the hum of a world that thrives on routine, on commerce, on daily life. The stone beneath your feet feels cool at first, worn smooth by the countless footsteps that have passed this way before you. You can almost imagine the press of sandals, the soft scuff of worn leather as people walked these same paths day in and day out, each one with their own quiet purpose. The cobblestones are old, yet sturdy, and each stone is part of a bigger story, a story that has survived the test of time, just like the people who walked here long before you. As you move further into the heart of the city, the scents begin to surround you. The smell of fresh bread wafts from an open-air bakery, the warmth of the dough blending with the fragrance of roasting meats. Nearby, a vendor is selling fruits, their bright colors and sweet tangy aroma tempting passersby. There's the distinct scent of spices, too earthy cumin, sharp coriander, and the sweet fragrance of cinnamon all mingling with the pervasive aroma of incense. The air is thick with it, and though it might overwhelm some, to you it feels grounding, calming, even familiar. Amidst all the sensory overload, there are quieter moments. A woman steps gently into a nearby alley, her basket balanced carefully on her head, her feet making little sound against the stone. The faint rustle of cloth as she adjusts her shawl is the only sound as she moves with purpose but unhurried. Further down the street, a man sits in the shade of a small stone doorway, his hands working slowly at his craft. The sound of his tools away at wood or stone becomes a rhythmic lull, a peaceful cadence in the midst of the bustling marketplace. The city is alive, yet there is an underlying calmness, a deliberate pace that seems to follow the natural flow of time itself. You notice a child playing by the side of the road, their laughter echoing in the air as they chase a small ball, their movements carefree and full of joy. It's a moment of simplicity in a world that can feel so full of complexity that as we walk, imagine your feet touching the same cobblestones where ancient feet once tread. How does it feel to be part of history like this? To share in the everyday lives of those who lived here, their movements etched into the very stones you walk on. Take a moment and reflect on that connection as we continue our journey through these ancient streets. The marketplace is the pulse of the city, the very heartbeat of daily life in ancient Egypt. It's where people come together, each with their own purpose, but all woven into the fabric of the same vibrant rhythm. As you step into the market, you're immediately engulfed in the sights and sounds that make this place come alive. The sun shines brightly, casting everything in a warm golden hue. The stalls are set up on every side, their canopies stretched wide to provide a little relief from the heat, and the air hums with the constant sound of conversation, laughter, and negotiation. The first thing you notice is the colors. Bright, bold textiles hang from every stall, deep reds, vibrant yellows, rich blues and greens. The cloth flows in, the breeze catching the light as the vendors hold it up to show off the fine weave. Silk and linen, soft to the touch, with patterns that tell stories of places far beyond the city. Some of the fabrics are embroidered with intricate designs, each stitch a small piece of art, a reflection of the people who made them. Around you, the voices of vendors rise and fall, each one calling out to passers-by. Fine linen, the best in all of Egypt, one cries. Another offers honeyed dates, their sweetness practically palpable in the air. The voices blend together in a cacophony of bargaining and salesmanship, a never-ending dance of haggling as sellers try to get the best price while buyers work to stretch their coin as far as it will go. There's a rhythm to it, sharp, quick exchanges of words, the art of negotiation almost as important as the goods themselves. It's a way of life, not rushed but steady. Like the ebb and flow of the Nile, you can hear the distinct sound of coins clinking, the exchange of goods as people trade, barter, and buy. There are fruits, vegetables, grains, everything needed to sustain life, from the simplest meal to the most elaborate feast. A group of women gathers around a stall selling spices, their hands reaching for small bags of coriander, cumin, and cinnamon, the air filled with the earthy aromatic scents that mark the bounty of the land. Dawn in the center of it all. A potter sits hunched over his wheel, his hands steady and sure as he shapes a vessel from the wet clay. The spinning motion of his wheel is hypnotic, almost meditative, and as you watch him work you feel a sense of calm wash over you. It's easy to get lost in the movement of everyday life here, where each person, no matter how busy, is just part of the greater flow of the city. Children run between the stalls, their giggles rising above the noise as they play games, dodging between adults as they go about their business. For a moment, you're reminded that even in the midst of all the commerce and trade, life here is still simple, full of small joys. A woman catches her child in her arms, pulling them gently back into line, but the smile on her face speaks of a quiet joy, a moment of love amid the bustle. The market is a place of survival, but it's also a place of connection, a place where people from all walks of life come together. It's here that relationships are built, not just between buyers and sellers, but between neighbors and strangers alike. With each trade a bond is formed, even if only for a moment. The flow of commerce is not just the exchange of goods, but of stories, of lives intersecting for a brief time before moving on. What do you think you'd be buying at the market? Let me know your thoughts below, and don't forget to subscribe for more tales from the past. As the day unfolds in the heart of ancient Egypt, the rhythm of life moves steadily forward, and work becomes the steady pulse that drives everything. The streets, once lively with the noise of merchants and traders, now hum with the sounds of labor. Every person, regardless of their station in life, has a role to play, a responsibility that cannot be avoided. From the skilled craftsmen to the farmers who tend the land, work here is the lifeblood of the civilization. It is both hard and meaningful, an unspoken contract between the people and the gods who look down upon them from above. Imagine yourself waking early as the first light of the sun begins to stretch across the sky. The air is cool, but the warmth of the day is already beginning to creep in. You gather your things, whether it's the tools of your trade or the basket for collecting your harvest, and step out into the world. For many, this is a time to focus on the tasks that will sustain the community. If you were a craftsman, your hands would be busy shaping clay into pottery, smoothing the rough edges of each vessel as you go. Each piece is an intricate work of art, made to serve a simple, everyday purpose, holding food or water but still requiring skill and care. The wheel spins slowly beneath your hands, the motion almost meditative as the clay takes shape. You can hear the soft scraping of your tools as you carve designs into the surface, images of animals, gods, or simple geometric patterns. Your work is not rushed. It is done with intention, as you know that every pot or jar you make will hold something of value for someone in this city. Further down the street, a group of laborers toils in the sun, moving heavy stones for the construction of the grand buildings that define Egypt's skyline. They sweat under the weight of their work, their muscles straining as they lift and place the stones with precision. Their work is grueling and relentless, but it serves a greater purpose: to build the monuments that will stand for centuries, long after their own lives have passed. Their role is vital to the very survival of the city, even though it may feel unnoticed in the day-to-day rush. Among these workers, women to play a crucial role. They wake just as early, their lives intertwined with the daily responsibilities of running a household, tending to the crops, and preparing food for their families. Many women also take part in weaving cloth, their fingers nimble as they create garments for the market or for family use. Their work, while often hidden behind the scenes, is just as vital to the function of society as the visible labor of the men. Women tend the gardens and fields, harvesting grains, vegetables, and fruits to ensure there is enough to feed everyone. The crops grow lush beside the great Nile River, nourished by its waters, but it is the steady hands of the women who bring the harvest to life. They bend over the soil, fingers working the earth as they collect food that will sustain their families, their communities. There is strength in their work, strength that goes beyond the physical to something deeper, something quiet and steady. And yet, it is not just the labor itself that shapes the lives of these people, but the purpose behind it. Whether you are crafting, building, or tending crops, your work contributes to something greater than yourself. It is a role that allows the civilization to thrive, to grow, and to leave behind monuments of greatness for those who come after. Imagine spending long hours crafting pottery or tending crops. What role do you think you'd have in this ancient world? Share your thoughts. The Nile River is the pulse of Egypt, a steady, unyielding flow that winds its way through the heart of the land, shaping every aspect of life. Imagine standing on its banks, watching the water stretch out before you like a living thing. It moves slowly, gracefully, but there is a quiet power in the way it flows, an ancient energy that has nurtured this land for thousands of years. You can hear it, feel it's a soft lapping of water against the shore. The rhythmic sound that echoes in your bones, a constant reminder of nature's force and its calming embrace. The Nile is not just a river, it is life itself. For the people of ancient Egypt, it was everything, the source of food, water, and transportation. Without it, Egypt would not be what it is. It was both a provider and a protector. Every year, it would flood, its waters rising up to irrigate the fields, depositing fertile silt that nourished the soil. It was the very lifeblood of the land, and without it, survival would have been a struggle. The rhythms of the Nile dictated the rhythms of life: when to plant, when to harvest, when to rest. Its seasons became a guide for the people, a gentle teacher that never failed to mark the passage of time. The river's waters were not just practical, they were sacred. The ancient Egyptians believed that the Nile was a gift from the gods, a divine presence that made life possible. The river was personified as Hapi, the god of the inundation, whose annual flooding brought new life to the land. People would gather to give thanks, offering prayers and sacrifices, knowing that the river's generosity was what allowed them to thrive. The river's flow was a symbol of abundance and renewal, its waters carrying with them the blessings of the divine. To live near the Nile was to be intimately connected to the very forces that governed life and death, to be in tune with the natural order of the world. As you stand by the river, you feel its calm, its steady rhythm. It has always been here, flowing past these shores long before your time and long after it. The quiet pull of the current is like the pull of life itself, constant, never-ending. There is a meditative quality to the river, an invitation to pause, to reflect, to listen to its timeless song. Every ripple in the water tells a story. Every wave that touches the bank is a reminder that time moves forward, gently but persistently. In a world that is often hurried, noisy, and filled with distraction, the Nile offers a moment of stillness. You can imagine how the people of ancient Egypt must have felt as they stood at its edge, gazing out across the vast expanse of water, their lives intertwined with its flow. It was their companion in life, a constant that provided not only physical nourishment but spiritual solace as well. They would have paused, just as you are now, to take in the beauty of the moment, to feel connected to something greater than themselves. The Nile also served as a means of travel and trade, its waters acting as a vast highway, linking cities and villages along its length. The boats that sailed upon it, carrying goods and people, glided smoothly across the water, their sails billowing in the wind. The river was a lifeline for communication, a way to connect with distant places, and it allowed Egypt to flourish as a powerful, interconnected civilization. As the river winds its way through the land, it brings life to everything it touches. It nurtures the crops, nourishes the people, and gives them the strength to build and create. Without the Nile, Egypt would not have been the mighty civilization it became. It is a reminder that the most important things in life often flow quietly, steadily, beneath the surface, shaping everything we do, even when we are not aware of it, as the Nile flows by. What do you think life must have been like for those who lived so closely to its waters? Take a moment to reflect. In ancient Egypt, the world was saturated with the divine. Everywhere you looked, there were signs of the gods etched into the walls of homes, temples, and tombs, woven into the fabric of daily life. The Egyptians believed that the gods were not distant or abstract. They were very much a part of the world, present in every action, every moment. The connection between humans and the divine was close, personal, and integral to the way life unfolded. Imagine waking up in the morning, the first light of dawn breaking through your window. Even before you step outside, you acknowledge the gods. Perhaps you light a small incense offering at an altar in your home, the smoke rising in the quiet air, a gesture of respect and thanks. You bow your head, offering a few whispered words of gratitude to Ra, the sun god, whose light brings life to the world. The simple act of lighting incense, the flicker of the flame, becomes an act of reverence, a way of grounding yourself in the world of the gods. This connection is not just confined to religious rituals in temples or grand ceremonies. It is woven into the everyday acts of life. The preparation of food, the tending of crops, the crafting of pottery, every action had a sacred quality to it. Even the most mundane tasks were seen as a way of honoring the gods. As you need dough for bread. Perhaps you whisper a prayer to Hathor, the goddess of love and joy, asking for her blessing on the food you are about to make. In every act, there is an awareness that you are part of something larger, something divine. The temples, grand and awe-inspiring, were the focal points of worship, where rituals were conducted by priests who had devoted their lives to serving the gods. These spaces were not just for the elite or the powerful. They were places where the whole community could come to connect with the divine. The air within the temple was thick with the scent of incense, the sound of chanting priests, and the hum of sacred energy. In the hushed reverence of these spaces, you could feel the presence of the gods, as though they were watching over you, listening to your prayers, and offering their guidance. Daily rituals were incredibly important. The Egyptians believed that in performing these rituals, they ensured the continued favor of the gods. Offerings of food, drink, and incense were made not just for the great gods like Osiris, Isis, or Horus, but for the household gods as well. Those small statues placed on altars, perhaps in the corner of the home where the family would gather and offer their respects. The ritual of offering was simple yet profound. You would kneel before the small altar, place the offering before the statue, and say a prayer, asking for the god's blessing for health, prosperity, or protection. But the divine was not only present in moments of quiet worship, it was also felt in moments of joy and celebration. Festivals dedicated to the gods would fill the streets with music, dancing, and feasts. The entire community would come together, sharing in the joy of honoring the gods, singing praises and celebrating the cycles of life. These were times when the connection between humans and the divine felt tangible, when the boundaries between the earthly and the spiritual seemed to blur. Imagine what it would have been like to live in such a spiritually rich world, where the gods were always watching, always present. There was no separation between the sacred and the secular. Every action, from the most intimate to the most public, was an offering, a prayer, a moment of connection. It was a life lived in the constant awareness of the divine, where every step you took felt like it was guided by the gods' unseen hands. The gods were part of the very fabric of life, and living in their presence was not a burden but a comfort. There was a sense of peace in knowing that the divine watched over every part of your existence. From your daily work to the moments of leisure, the knowledge that the gods were near, that they cared for you, must have brought a quiet sense of reassurance, a certainty that you were never truly alone. Can you think of a time when you felt this deep connection? Perhaps it was a moment of quiet reflection, or a simple ritual that brought you closer to something greater than yourself. The people of ancient Egypt lived their lives steeped in this connection, and it's easy to imagine how comforting it would have been to feel the god's presence with you, guiding every part of your day. As you step closer to the grand temple, the noise of the outside world begins to fade. The chatter of the marketplace, the bustle of the streets, the heat of the sun, all of it starts to dissipate, leaving only the quiet, sacred space before you. The towering columns of the temple rise majestically, their surfaces etched with stories of gods and pharaohs, their shadows stretching long across the stone floor. The air feels cooler here, a gentle respite from the warmth of the day. And as you step across the threshold, you are enveloped in a calm that seems to come from the very walls themselves. Inside, the temple is a world apart. The light is soft, muted by the narrow openings high above, where the sun's rays filter through in beams of golden light. It's almost as if the temple itself breathes in time with your own movements, a steady rhythm that fills the air with reverence. The scent of incense curls upward, thick and aromatic, wrapping around you like a quiet embrace. It's not overwhelming, but rather calming, a blend of myrrh, frankincense, and herbs that soothe the mind and spirit, filling the space with a tranquil, almost dreamlike quality. The flickering light of candles dances softly against the stone walls, their flames casting gentle shadows that seem to whisper of ages long past. As you walk deeper into the temple, you can feel the weight of history pressing in around you. This is a place where the gods once walked, where people came to seek guidance, protection, and blessings. The sacredness of the space is palpable. It's as though the very air is charged with the presence of the divine. The quiet is profound, broken only by the soft sound of your footsteps echoing through the stone corridors. A reminder that you are not alone, but in the company of something much greater than yourself. The temple is not just a physical structure, but a space for the soul to pause, to reflect, and to find peace. The people who came here did not hurry. There was no rush. It was a place for contemplation, for connecting with the divine in the stillness. Perhaps, like the ancient Egyptians who visited, you would kneel at the altar, your head bowed in quiet reverence, offering a prayer or simply resting in the serene silence of this holy space. The act of being here, in this sacred space, invites you to let go of the world outside and be present, to let your thoughts slow and your heart soften. In the presence of the gods, there is no need for words. The flicker of the candles, the slow burn of incense, the stillness of the air, all of it speaks in a language that transcends speech. It's as if the very act of being here is enough. You are part of something much larger than yourself, connected not just to the ancient people who once prayed here, but to the timeless rhythm of life itself. The temple, with its soaring pillars and sacred carvings, offers a space where reflection and reverence come naturally, a place where your soul can rest even if just for a moment. In every culture, sacred spaces like this offer us the opportunity to pause, to reflect, and to connect with something beyond the everyday. Whether it's a church, a mosque, or a quiet corner of nature, these places invite us to slow down, to be still, and to listen to the whispers of history and spirit. They remind us of the beauty of the present moment, of the peace that comes when we allow ourselves to be fully immersed in the quiet. Close your eyes and imagine stepping into this temple. How does it feel to be in a place so full of history and spirituality? The weight of the past and the presence of the divine hang in the air, inviting you to pause and breathe, to reflect and rest in the quiet peace that surrounds you. Take the moment to sit with that feeling and let the stillness of the temple sink into your soul. In ancient Egypt, women were the quiet architects of the world around them. While the great monuments, the pharaohs and the grand temples often stole the limelight, it was the women who wove the fabric of daily life, quietly shaping society in ways that were just as profound, though sometimes overlooked. Their roles were multifaceted, balancing domestic duties, spiritual practices, and even political influence, all with a strength that was often subtle but always essential. Picture yourself in the home of an ancient Egyptian woman. The day begins early, the cool air of the morning slipping in through the open windows as you rise to greet the sun. The smell of fresh bread baking in the oven, the sound of children laughing as they play outside. These are the simple pleasures of daily life, but beneath this peaceful surface lies the unspoken weight of responsibility. Women were the keepers of the home, responsible for its organization, its cleanliness, and the well-being of their families. They prepared the food, managed the household, and cared for the children, ensuring that the home ran smoothly. Every day, the rhythm of their tasks created a steady pulse that kept the heart of the home alive. But women's influence in ancient Egypt extended far beyond the domestic sphere. They were revered in spiritual life, playing crucial roles in religious rituals and temple duties. In a world where the gods were deeply woven into every part of existence, women were often seen as the mediators between the divine and the earthly. The high priestesses of temples were not just spiritual leaders, they were powerful figures, entrusted with the sacred duties of offering prayers and sacrifices, and ensuring the continued favor of the gods. Women's participation in religious ceremonies was an act of profound reverence, and their presence in temples was a testament to the respect with which they were held. In the grand temples dedicated to gods like Isis and Hathor, women performed rituals that honored these deities. These rituals, rich in symbolism and grace, were not only acts of worship but also affirmations of the balance and harmony that women brought to Egyptian society. Through prayer and ritual, they maintained the connection between the human world and the divine. The very act of participating in these ceremonies was a quiet declaration of the importance of the feminine force within the spiritual landscape of Egypt. Beyond the temple, women's roles also intersected with the royal and political world. While the image of the ruling pharaoh is often associated with powerful men, women, too, held significant sway in the halls of power. Some became queens and regents, wielding political authority in their own right. The most famous of these women, Queen Hatshepsut, ruled as pharaoh and oversaw monumental building projects that defined Egypt's grandeur. Her reign was marked by peace and prosperity, and while she may have had to navigate a male-dominated political landscape, she did so with quiet strength, guiding Egypt as a ruler in her own right. But it wasn't only women in royal families who played a part in shaping Egypt's future. Many women exercised influence through their roles as wives and mothers, ensuring the continuity of dynasties and the stability of the kingdom. A woman's ability to bear children, especially male heirs, was of immense importance in a society where family lineage and royal succession were paramount. Yet even in these roles, women maintained a sense of dignity and quiet power. To be a mother was to hold the future of Egypt in your hands, and the reverence given to mothers was palpable in the way society upheld the importance of motherhood. Every woman in ancient Egypt, whether of noble birth or common stock, carried a quiet strength that contributed to the society's fabric. Their work, though often unnoticed in the grand historical narratives, was the foundation upon which Egypt's greatness rested. They balanced the demands of domesticity with their spiritual and sometimes political responsibilities, weaving a tapestry of influence that stretched across generations. What would it feel like to be a woman in such a society, where your work and influence shaped everything? You would carry the weight of your family, your community, and your country's spiritual life with grace, working tirelessly to maintain the balance of everyday life while also holding space for the divine. In this world, your presence would be both seen and unseen, woven into the rhythm of life in ways that were essential but often quietly revered. Reflect on that as you listen, and think about how the quiet strength of women has shaped history in countless ways. In ancient Egypt, food was not just about sustenance, it was an integral part of daily life, woven into the very fabric of family, community, and spiritual practice. The rhythms of the day were marked by the preparation and sharing of meals, and the foods of Egypt, simple yet rich in flavor, nourished not only the body but the soul. Imagine waking early in the morning, the soft glow of the rising sun spilling across the earth. You can already smell the warm, yeasty fragrance of bread baking in the oven. It's a familiar scent, one that has greeted people for centuries in Egypt, a scent that signals the beginning of the day, the start of something comforting and essential. The bread is the staple of every meal, made from finely ground wheat or barley. It is simple, sometimes flat and round, sometimes thick and hearty, but always satisfying. The golden crust is slightly crisp, while the inside remains soft and warm, a perfect companion to the rest of the day's offerings. As you break a piece, the warmth from the bread spreads through your fingers, and you know that this small act tearing off a piece of fresh bread is as much about tradition as it is about nourishment. Alongside the bread, there are fruits and vegetables that are the pride of the fertile land along the Nile. The soil here is rich, made bountiful by the annual flooding of the river, and from it springs a harvest of vibrant produce. Imagine the crisp, cool taste of cucumbers, their flesh juicy and refreshing, perfect for the warm Egyptian days. You can almost taste the sweet tempts of pomegranates, their ruby red seeds bursting in your mouth. A delightful combination of tart and sweet. The dates, plump and rich, offer a sweetness that lingers, while figs, fresh from the tree, provide a smooth, honeyed texture. Each fruit is a reminder of the life-giving power of the Nile and the earth's ability to provide. Year after year, there is also the fish, abundant from the river that runs through the heart of Egypt. Fresh Nile perch, its tender white flesh, perfectly complemented by a subtle smokiness, would be grilled over an open flame. The scent of the fish, seasoned with herbs and salt, would mingle with the smoke rising from the fire, filling the air with a savory aroma. You can almost hear the crackle of the fire as it cooks, the quiet sizzle as the fish browns, and the occasional splash of water as the fish is dropped into a pot for stews or soups. The combination of fish and vegetables creates hearty, flavorful meals that are both grounding and fulfilling. Meals in ancient Egypt were more than just a way to quiet the hunger. They were an opportunity for families to come together, to share, not just food, but stories, laughter, and connection. Picture yourself sitting with your family around a low table, the sun beginning to set, casting a soft golden light across the room. The bread, fruit, and fish are passed around, and you eat slowly, savoring each bite, grateful for the bounty that the land and the river have provided. The air is filled with the sounds of conversation, the occasional burst of laughter, and the hum of life moving steadily forward. These meals are a sacred time and opportunity to pause, to reflect, and to nourish the body and the soul. The Egyptians believed that food was a gift from the gods, and each meal was a moment to show gratitude for the blessings of the earth. The simple act of sharing a meal was, in a way, a ritual, a small but significant offering to the divine. Each bite was a reminder of the deep connection between humanity and the land, between the work of the people and the blessings of the gods. The nourishment you received was not just physical, but spiritual, as it connected you to something much larger than yourself: the land, the river, the gods, and your community. Can you smell the bread baking in the oven? The scent is warm, familiar, and comforting. If you could enjoy a meal with ancient Egyptians, what would you ask them to prepare? Would you share in the humble bread, or taste the sweet, vibrant fruits, or perhaps savor the freshly caught fish from the river? Each meal, a reflection of Egypt's rich and abundant life, was not just about food, it was about sharing, connecting, and honoring the cycles of life. The homes of ancient Egypt, whether simple mud-brick dwellings or grand estates, were designed with a deep understanding of both practicality and comfort. They offered a safe haven, a place of respite from the world, and a space where families could gather at the end of a long day to find peace, warmth, and connection. Imagine yourself stepping inside one of these homes. The heat of the day begins to melt away as you cross the threshold, entering the cool shade of the house. The walls, made of sun-dried mud brick, are thick, insulating against both the heat of the day and the chill of the night. The floor beneath your feet is smooth, worn from years of use, but still sturdy. The air smells faintly of wood, earth, and incense, a calming mix that signals this is a place for rest, reflection, and belonging. In the simpler homes, the space is open and airy, designed to maximize comfort in the hot Egyptian climate. The layout is modest, with a small courtyard in the center where families could sit and relax during the evenings. When the temperature dropped and the stars began to shine brightly above, the walls of the courtyard are often adorned with simple but beautiful paintings, depictions of daily life, scenes of the gods, or even images of family members. These colorful artworks lend the space a sense of life, a reminder of the stories that shaped the family within. The furniture is sparse but functional: low wooden stools, mats on the floor for sitting, and simple tables where meals are shared. The rooms are cool and shaded, with small openings near the ceiling that allow for a soft breeze to flow through, offering a break from the stillness of the midday heat. There's a peacefulness here, a sense of quietness that invites you to slow down, to pause from the outside world, and to savor the comfort of home. For wealthier families, homes might be more elaborate, though still deeply tied to the idea of creating a calm and harmonious space. The larger estates often include multiple rooms and courtyards, with walls lined with shelves that hold pottery, linen, and perhaps the sacred idols of household gods. The materials are finer wooden beams for support, beautifully crafted furniture, and rich tapestries that offer both warmth and color to the rooms. Despite the grander scale, the sense of tranquility is ever present. These larger homes are designed not to impress but to provide a place of peace and comfort for those who live there. The most important part of any home, no matter the size, was the central family space. It was here that the family came together, to eat, to talk, and to rest after a long day's work. In the evenings, when the sun had set and the coolness of the night began to creep in, the home became a sanctuary. You can imagine the soft flicker of oil lamps casting warm, golden light over the faces of those you love. Perhaps you sit together in the courtyard, enjoying the gentle breeze and the quiet sounds of the night. The faint rustle of palm trees, swaying in the wind, the distant hum of the city all fade away as you settle into the peaceful rhythm of home life. It is in these moments, as the world outside quiets, that the true value of home reveals itself. It's not just the shelter from the heat or the protection from the elements. It's the calmness, the sense of belonging, and the space to recharge that makes the home so special. The simple act of sharing a meal with family, of exchanging stories, of being together in a space that is uniquely your own, is what makes a house a home. The walls may be made of mud, brick, or stone, but the true foundation of these homes is love, connection, and the shared experience of life. Even in the grandest homes, there is no sense of rushing, no hurry to fill every moment with activity. There's a quietness that pervades the air, inviting reflection and peacefulness. The home, whether simple or elaborate, serves as a place of solace, or retreat from the busy world outside where you can find rest and feel grounded. What would your home look like in ancient Egypt? Would it be a modest, cool space with simple furnishings, or would you find yourself in a larger, grander home, surrounded by beautiful objects and sacred symbols? Let your imagination wander, and picture the way your days would unfold in such a space, surrounded by the warmth of family and the calming presence of home. In ancient Egypt, traveling was a far cry from the fast-paced modern journeys we know. Today, there were no speeding carriages or bustling airports. Travel here was a slow, deliberate process, where every step, every journey, was carefully considered and deeply connected to the rhythms of the land. Whether by foot, boat, or donkey, traveling in Egypt was a way of life that required patience and mindfulness, as every movement across the land felt like a journey through time itself. Imagine yourself setting out for a distant city, perhaps to visit a relative or to trade goods. The first thing you notice is the vastness of the land. The towering sand dunes stretch endlessly on one side, while the lush Nile Valley spreads out before you, its green fields a sharp contrast against the brown of the desert. The road ahead is not paved or cleared. It is a simple path worn by countless footsteps, winding its way through the landscape in the most natural way possible. Your footsteps are measured, deliberate, and every step brings you closer to your destination. But there is no rush. Travel by foot was common for many Egyptians, especially those who lived in rural areas. It might take days, even weeks, to journey to a city, and the landscape would constantly change around you. The heat of the midday sun would be harsh, but the mornings and evenings, as the temperature cools, would offer a respite. You would have to pace yourself, taking rest when needed, seeking shelter beneath the shade of palm trees or a rock outcrop, and perhaps sipping water from a small flask you carry with you. For those traveling along the Nile, the journey would be different. Boats were the most common method of transportation, and the great river became a highway for people and goods alike. Picture yourself on a sturdy wooden boat, the gentle rocking of the water beneath you as you make your way downstream. The boat moves slowly, carried along by the current, and as you drift, you can't help but feel the connection to the ancient world that surrounds you. On both sides of the river, the fields stretch out in neat rows, and in the distance, you might see the peaks of distant cities or the shimmering walls of temples catching the sunlight. Traveling by boat was not only practical, but it was also a deeply meditative experience. The sound of the water lapping against the hull, the rhythmic paddling of the crew, and the occasional call of birds flying overhead, the entire journey felt like a slow and steady passage through the landscape. Time seemed to stretch and stretch, with no urgency to the journey, no need to hurry. The only thing that mattered was the destination and the journey itself. For those who could afford it, travel might also include the use of donkeys or camels, creatures specially adapted to handle the harsh terrain. The slow pace of travel on these animals allowed you to take in the scenery of the golden sands of the desert, the green life that flourished near the Nile, the majestic mountains in the distance. The journey would be taken in small, thoughtful steps, with frequent pauses to rest and take in the beauty around you, unlike the fast-paced travel we experience today. Moving from place to place in ancient Egypt required a great deal of patience and mindfulness. Every moment of travel, whether by foot, boat, or beast, was an opportunity to reflect, to appreciate the landscape, and to reconnect with the land itself. As you move through Egypt, whether it's along the riverbanks or across the dry, dusty roads, There's a quiet rhythm to the travel. Each mile crossed marks the slow passage of time, and the beauty of the land unfolds before you at a pace that encourages you to take it all in. The slowness of travel in ancient Egypt allowed for a deeper connection with the land and its people. There was no rushing to arrive, no ticking clock pushing you forward. Instead, there was a kind of reverence for the journey itself, a recognition that the time spent moving through the landscape was just as important as the destination. If you had to travel to a distant city, what would you take with you? Would you carry the simple essentials, food, water, and a cloak to shield you from the sun, or would you bring along something more personal? Perhaps a keepsake or an offering to the gods for protection on your journey. Let's share thoughts in the comments. In ancient Egypt, fashion was more than just about looking good. It was a reflection of identity, social status, and the delicate balance between comfort and tradition. The clothing worn by the people of Egypt was simple in design, yet each piece carried deep significance, both practical and symbolic. Whether it was the cool linen tunics of the common people or the elaborate jewelry and headpieces of the elite, what you wore in ancient Egypt told a story about who you were, where you came from, and what your role in society might be. Imagine yourself stepping into the shoes of an ancient Egyptian woman. The first thing you'd notice is the softness of linen against your skin. Linen was the fabric of choice in Egypt, woven from the flax plant that grew abundantly in the fertile Nile Delta. It's light and breathable, making it perfect for the hot Egyptian climate. The linen tunic you slip into is simple, yet it's clean. Smooth fabric feels comfortable against your skin. It is perhaps knee length or ankle length, and it falls loosely over your body, allowing air to flow freely, offering relief from the relentless heat of the sun. For the common folk, this linen tunic was the height of fashion. It was practical, cool, and easy to move in. The tunic could be tied at the waist with a belt, but it remained simple and adorned, aside from the occasional color or pattern that might be added for a bit of flair. A simple sash or headband might be worn, but there was nothing extravagant about it. The focus was on function, comfort, breathability, and practicality. After all, a common person in ancient Egypt spent most of their day working in the fields or marketplaces, and their clothes were meant to serve their busy, active lives. However, for those of higher status, clothing took on a more intricate and symbolic form. Linen tunics could be made of finer, more luxurious fabric, sometimes bleached to a brilliant white or dyed in rich colors like deep red, blue, or purple. The elite often wore clothing that featured pleats or folds, and some garments were made to look elaborate and layered, reflecting the wealth and importance of the wearer. For those of royal or noble birth, clothing was a sign of their elevated position within society. Jewelry was not just a decorative accessory but a symbol of wealth and power, with gold and precious stones like lapis lazuli and turquoise being used to adorn the body. One of the most striking aspects of Egyptian fashion was the way jewelry was used to express status. Necklaces, bracelets, rings, and earrings often made of gold and semi-precious stones were worn by both men and women of higher rank. These pieces were not just decorative, they were believed to have protective powers, and the gods themselves were thought to be present in the materials used. The rich and intricate designs of the jewelry were symbols of beauty, power, and divine favor. The wealthy might also wear wide collars made of beads and precious metals, known as wesek necklaces, which were often seen in depictions of the elite and royal families. Headpieces were also an important part of fashion, especially for the women of high status. A simple headband made of linen could be worn for daily use, but elaborate headdresses, adorned with gold and precious stones, were the mark of nobility. The famous crown of the pharaohs, often depicted in paintings and sculptures, was perhaps the most extravagant headpiece of all. This crown, a symbol of divine rule, was worn only by those with the highest authority in the land. Even the simple practice of styling hair had its own significance. Wigs, often made from human hair, were worn by both men and women to display wealth or as a protective measure against lice. The care of one's appearance was a sign of respect, not only for oneself but for the gods. Clothing, too, carried spiritual significance. The Egyptians believed that their appearance, how they dressed, was a reflection of their relationship with the divine. To be clean and well-groomed was a sign of respect for the gods, and many people would wash and prepare themselves for religious ceremonies or festivals, donning their finest garments for these occasions. Rituals often included wearing specific colors or styles of clothing that were thought to please particular gods, adding yet another layer of meaning to what was worn. That as you imagine slipping into the soft linen of an ancient Egyptian dress, you can almost feel the connection to a past so deeply embedded in ritual and culture. How does it feel to wear such a simple yet meaningful piece of clothing, one that not only keeps you cool in the desert sun but also tells the story of a place in this ancient society? Is a humble garment, yet it carries centuries of history and significance. Imagine how your own identity would be reflected in the clothes you wear. In ancient Egypt, clothing was more than just a practical choice. It was a statement. It was a way to express your place in the world, to honor the gods, and to mark the rhythm of daily life. What do you think it would feel like to wear these clothes? How would they shape your connection to the world around you? Share your thoughts below. In ancient Egypt, health and hygiene were considered essential to maintaining both physical well-being and spiritual purity. The Egyptians, ever mindful of the connection between body and spirit, created a world where cleanliness was not just a daily necessity, but a way of life that fostered peace, health, and harmony. The rituals and practices they developed to care for their bodies reflected deep respect for the self and the divine. Imagine stepping into an ancient Egyptian home after a long day. The air is warm, perhaps a little sticky from the heat of the sun, but inside, there is a sense of calm. One of the most cherished rituals in any Egyptian home was the daily bath. A large basin filled with cool, refreshing water sat in the corner, often in a room designated for personal hygiene. The process of bathing was considered a cleansing of not just the body, but the soul as well. Water was sacred, a gift from the gods, and its purity was believed to wash away not only physical dirt but also any impurities in the spirit. The bath itself was often simple but profoundly soothing. The Egyptians would pour water over themselves, sometimes using a bowl or a sponge made from plant fibers. They would then apply oils and perfumes to their skin scents, like myrrh, frankincense, and sandalwood, chosen not only for their pleasant fragrances but also for their soothing properties. These oils would be massaged into the skin, nourishing it while also serving as a protective layer against the harsh desert winds. The process was slow, deliberate, and meditative, a moment of personal care that encouraged mindfulness and reflection. The act of bathing in itself was seen as a purification, both physical and spiritual, connecting the person to the cleansing power of the gods. In addition to the ritual of bathing, the Egyptians also placed great importance on their dental care, while the toothbrush and toothpaste we know today were not available. The ancient Egyptians had their own methods for maintaining oral health. They used sticks from certain trees, which they chewed on to create a natural rudimentary brush. Crushed pumice or salt was often mixed with water to make a paste for cleaning the teeth, and the Egyptians understood the importance of flossing using twine or other materials to remove debris from between their teeth. Their dedication to maintaining a healthy smile reflects how much they valued cleanliness, even in the smallest details. The Egyptians were also skilled in the use of natural remedies for treating ailments. Medicine was intertwined with their spiritual beliefs, and many remedies were rooted in the natural world around them. The Egyptians believed that illness could be caused by both physical and spiritual imbalances, so their treatments often blended practical healing with divine intervention. Herbs, oils, and various plants were used to treat everything from headaches to digestive issues. Aloe vera was a popular remedy for skin irritations, and garlic was often used to treat infections or as a general health tonic. These remedies were passed down through generations, not just as practical solutions but as ways to maintain a sense of balance and peace in one's life. Even in their more advanced practices, such as surgery, the Egyptians found ways to combine health with ritual. Physicians were often also priests, and their treatments were accompanied by prayers and offerings to the gods. They understood that healing was not just about curing the body, but about restoring harmony and balance to the spirit. This holistic approach to health, body, mind, and soul was central to the Egyptian way of life. But perhaps the most beautiful aspect of Egyptian hygiene and health practices was the sense of peace they cultivated through these everyday rituals. The simple act of bathing, the calming use of oils and perfumes, the care taken in personal hygiene, these were not just tasks to be checked off a list. They were moments of calm, of quiet connection with the self. In a world that could often be harsh and demanding, these rituals offered a sanctuary, a space where one could take a deep breath, slow down, and find a sense of peace as you imagine. Stepping into one of these ancient baths, surrounded by the soft scent of incense and oils, you can almost feel the stress of the day melting away. The gentle flow of water, the soothing touch of oils against your skin. This was a space for renewal, both physical and spiritual. In this quiet moment, you could reconnect with yourself and the divine, a sense of calm washing over you, bringing peace and restoration. But you feel at peace after a long bath in one of these ancient baths? Let's reflect together in the comments. In ancient Egypt, much of the society's greatness was built by the hands of the common people, the farmers, laborers, craftsmen, and traders, whose lives were often marked by quiet struggles. For the lower-class Egyptians, life was a constant balancing act between survival and a deep, enduring resilience. Their homes were modest, their work demanding, and their rest scarce. Yet in the midst of hardship, they found ways to carry on, holding tight to the simple joys and small moments of peace that life had to offer. Picture yourself living in a humble mud brick home, tucked away in a small village by the Nile. The structure is simple roofed hewn walls of sun-dried bricks, a flat roof that offers little protection from the relentless heat of the sun. Inside, there are no luxuries, only the bare essentials. A small hearth for cooking, a few mats on the floor for sleeping, and maybe a small table or chest to store what few possessions you might have. The space is simple, but it is your sanctuary, your family's home. It offers shelter from the outside world, a place to rest at the end of a long day. But there is no room for extravagance. Every inch of this home is carefully thought out for the practicalities of daily life. and even the smallest comforts are hard-earned. The work of the poor was grueling. For many, life revolved around farming. The land, the fertile banks of the Nile provided the most precious resource, the crops that fed Egypt. But farming was far from an easy task. The work started before the sun rose and stretched long into the evening, with only short breaks in between. The soil needed to be tilled, the fields irrigated, and the crops harvested. In the hot sun, the labor could be exhausting, but it was essential to the survival of everyone in the community. For the common worker, their labor was the foundation upon which the city was built. But it often went unseen, unnoticed by the great temples and monuments that were erected in the name of the pharaohs. There were also those who worked as craftsmen, creating pottery, jewelry, textiles, or tools. The work was painstaking, requiring skill and patience. Each item, whether it was a pot for food or a simple piece of cloth, was crafted by hand, often taking hours or days to perfect. These craftsmen were artisans in their own right, creating objects of everyday life that would go on to shape the function and beauty of the Egyptian world. But despite their talent, their lives were humble. Their work was often undervalued, and they had little control over the prices they were paid. Yet they found pride in what they did. Every pot they shaped, every piece of cloth they wove, was a small act of creation, and in this they found meaning. For many lower-class Egyptians, life was a never-ending cycle of hard work, with little opportunity for rest or leisure. Their labor was unceasing, and the days blurred together in a pattern of toil. And yet, there was a quiet strength in their perseverance. Despite the weight of their burdens, they managed to find joy in the smallest of things: a shared meal, the laughter of children playing in the dust, a brief respite in the shade of a palm tree at midday. There was resilience in their lives, an unspoken understanding that, while life was hard, it was also full of moments that made the struggle worth enduring. Consider how, at the end of a long day, they would return home, exhausted, their bodies sore from labor. But they would gather together as a family, perhaps sitting around a small fire, sharing stories, food, and the company of loved ones. The meal would often be simple: bread, onions, vegetables, maybe some fish or lentils, but it was enough. The act of sharing food with family, of sitting together and finding solace in one another's presence, offered a sense of peace that no amount of material wealth could provide. It was in these quiet, fleeting moments that they could feel human, again connected to something greater than the struggles of the day. The children of the poor often did not have the luxury of childhood as we think of it. Instead of playing carefree in the streets, they often helped with the work, whether it was gathering water, tending to animals, or assisting with farming. Yet, even within the hardships, there were moments of innocence and joy. Children would play games, inventing simple toys from whatever they could find. Laughter, too, would rise in the streets, lightening the load of their parents, if only for a brief moment. In this way, even the youngest learned early the resilience that would carry them through their own lives. Despite the hardships, the lives of the poor were not without hope. They lived with a sense of community, supporting one another through the difficulties. The bonds between families and neighbors were strong, and there was a shared understanding that survival was not just an individual effort but a collective one. They celebrated together during the festivals, where, for a brief time, they could put aside their work and enjoy the fruits of the harvest, or participate in religious rites that celebrated the gods. It was during these moments of collective celebration that they found a sense of belonging and joy, even in the face of adversity in many ways. The lives of the poor in ancient Egypt were marked by quiet suffering that was never truly recognized in the grand narratives of history. But within that suffering, there was also quiet dignity and an ability to find joy in the simplest of things. They worked tirelessly, often without rest, but in the process they built a society that has endured through the ages. Their labor, their resilience, their ability to find peace in the small moments of life, all of this shaped the very foundations of the Egypt we know today. What do you think it would feel to work so hard every day without much rest? Reflect on that and share your thoughts. Would you find strength in the quiet moments of life, or would the weight of it all feel too much to bear? Let's think about how these simple, everyday experiences shaped the people of ancient Egypt, and how they continue to resonate with us today. In the bustling, labor-filled life of an ancient Egyptian, moments of leisure were not just breaks from the grind. They were essential, precious times of rest, joy, and connection. In a society where daily work was demanding, whether in the fields, workshops, or homes, leisure provided the necessary balance, offering both physical relaxation and mental restoration. These moments allowed the Egyptians to reconnect with themselves, their families, and their communities, fostering bonds that would sustain them through the hard work and long hours. Imagine yourself in an ancient Egyptian village. After a long day of labor, the sun begins to set, and the oppressive heat of the day slowly gives way to the cool evening breeze. The world, for a moment, slows down. The bustling marketplace has quieted, the sounds of busy feet and chattering voices now replaced by the peaceful hum of evening. At the end of a long day, the Egyptians found their leisure not in extravagant pastimes but in simple, fulfilling activities, small joys that brought people together and allowed them to relax. One of the most common forms of leisure was gathering with others to play games. The ancient Egyptians loved their board games, and many played them to pass the time in the cooler hours of the day or evening. Sonat, a game that dates back to at least 3100 BCE, was one of the most popular. Played on a rectangular board with 30 squares, players used sticks or bones as dice to move their pieces, hoping to win by strategically placing them on the board. The game was not just about competition. It had spiritual significance. It was believed to represent the journey of the soul through the afterlife, and playing it was as much a spiritual reflection as it was a pastime. The excitement and joy of playing games like Sonat brought friends and family together, sparking laughter and conversation. These moments were far more than a mere distraction from the work of the day. They were opportunities to bond, to share stories, and to relax in a space where the pressures of daily life could be momentarily forgotten. Whether it was children playing in the streets, adults challenging each other in games, or even elderly family members watching, these small moments of connection helped weave the social fabric of Egyptian life. But leisure wasn't just confined to games. The Egyptians also found joy in music and dance. Whether it was an impromptu celebration or a festival honoring the gods, music played an important role in their leisure time. Harps, flutes, lyres, and drums were commonly played, creating an atmosphere of joy and celebration. Women, men, and children might gather in a circle, clapping their hands or dancing to the rhythm of the music, their feet moving in time with the beat. Even in the humblest of homes, music and dance were a way to lift spirits and create an air of festivity as the evening grew darker. The Egyptians might gather around a fire. The warmth of the flames, the crackle of burning wood, and the quiet murmur of conversation created an intimate and relaxing environment. This was a time to unwind, to share stories, or to simply sit in companionable silence with family or friends. The flickering firelight cast dancing shadows on the walls, and in these quiet, intimate moments, life slowed down, offering a reprieve from the struggles of the day. Even with such simplicity, the ancient Egyptians understood the importance of leisure for mental and physical health. They took the time to rest their bodies and minds, knowing that these moments of relaxation would rejuvenate them for the work ahead. Whether playing a game, listening to music, or simply sharing a peaceful moment with loved ones, the Egyptians found ways to recharge in a world that was otherwise demanding and full of responsibilities. Their leisure was not an indulgence, that was necessary for their well-being, just as essential as food or sleep. On the grander scale, during festivals and public performances, leisure took on a more communal form. These celebrations were often tied to religious observances, marking the seasons, honoring the gods, or celebrating victories. People would gather in large groups, participating in or watching performances that included music, dance, theatrical plays, and even acrobatic feats. These events were full of life, with the entire community coming together to celebrate in harmony. The performances were colorful, the music vibrant, and the dancing full of energy. For a few days, people could forget the struggles of their everyday lives and lose themselves in the joy of shared celebration. Even in these grand moments, there was an underlying theme of connection. Whether it was in the quiet of the home or the collective joy of a festival, leisure was a time for bonding, for relaxation, and for finding joy in the simple things. The Egyptians understood that life was hard, and they knew that rest was not just a break, it was a vital part of maintaining balance in their lives. Leisure, for them, was not an escape from reality, but a way to deepen their connection with the people around them and to restore their spirits. As you imagine the simple pleasures of life in ancient Egypt, the games, the music, the quiet moments by the fire, think of your own moments of relaxation. What was the most enjoyable part of your day? Perhaps it was a quiet moment of peace, a chance to unwind and find joy in the company of others. For the Egyptians, these moments were an essential part of their rhythm of life, offering balance in a world full of work and duty. What do you find most peaceful in your own life? Reflect on that and share your thoughts below. On ancient Egypt, the concept of the afterlife was deeply embedded in the culture and spiritual life of the people. Death was not seen as an end but as a transition, a journey to another realm where life continued in a different form. The Egyptians' views on the afterlife were peaceful, serene, and filled with hope, offering comfort in the face of mortality. To them, death was not something to fear but a natural part of the cycle of existence, a continuation of the journey that began with birth. Imagine, for a moment, the calm reflections of an ancient Egyptian as they prepared for their own death. It wasn't a time of dread or sorrow, but a time for spiritual preparation, for ensuring that the journey into the afterlife would be peaceful. The Egyptians believed that life after death was a continuation of the life they had known on earth, but in a purer, more divine form. They envisioned a world where they would be reunited with loved ones, where they would live in harmony with the gods, and where the pleasures of the physical world, food, family, music, and beauty would continue. In the afterlife, for the Egyptians, preparing for death was not a hurried process. It was something that began long before the moment came. The mummification process itself was a careful, sacred ritual. The body was preserved with the utmost care, so that it could be recognized and honored in the afterlife. This act of preservation was a reflection of their belief that the soul, or ka, would need a physical body to return to after death. The mummies were placed in tombs with everything they might need for their journey: food, drink, tools, jewelry, and other items that would bring comfort in the afterlife. It was believed that these offerings would ensure the deceased's well-being in their new existence. But it wasn't just the physical body that needed attention. The spiritual preparations for the afterlife were equally important. The ancient Egyptians believed in a divine judgment that awaited each soul after death. The weighing of the heart ceremony, one of the most important aspects of the Egyptian afterlife, was where the heart of the deceased was weighed against the feather of Mat, symbolizing truth and justice. If the heart was found to be pure, the deceased would be granted passage into the field of reeds, a paradise-like realm where they could live forever in peace. If the heart was heavy with sin, the soul would be devoured by the fearsome creature Ammit, and the soul would cease to exist. This belief in judgment and the afterlife shaped every part of the Egyptians' lives. They lived with the understanding that their actions, their choices, would have consequences not just in their earthly lives but in their spiritual journeys after death. But this wasn't a fearful thought. Rather, it was a guide for living rightly, acting with honor, truth, and respect for the gods and for one another. The afterlife gave life a sense of purpose, a reason to live in harmony with the natural world and the divine order. Death was also a deeply communal event. Families came together to mourn and honor the deceased. But there was a sense of continuity. Life went on, and the deceased remained part of the family's spiritual circle. Offerings of food, drink, and incense were made regularly at the tombs of the departed, and these rituals were a way to maintain the bond between the living and the dead. The tombs themselves were often decorated with scenes of the deceased enjoying a peaceful, happy afterlife. These depictions showed the importance of living a life filled with joy and harmony, as this joy would carry on into eternity. The Egyptians' peaceful view of death also found expression in their art and literature. The pyramid texts, written on the walls of the tombs, are full of images of the deceased being welcomed into the afterlife, greeted by the gods with open arms. These texts reflect the Egyptians' belief that death was not a final separation but a reunion with the divine. Their artwork, whether it was the serene statues of the pharaohs or the brightly colored murals on tomb walls, all conveyed a sense of calm and eternity. There was no fear in death, only a peaceful transition to a new form of existence. As the ancient Egyptians lived their lives, they did so with the afterlife always in mind. Their homes, their tombs, and their rituals were all designed to help them live in such a way that their journey to the next world would be peaceful and harmonious. The idea that death was not an end but a continuation allowed them to approach life with a sense of purpose and serenity. In our own lives, we can reflect on the calmness with which the Egyptians faced death. Their acceptance of mortality, their spiritual preparation, and their hopeful view of the afterlife were all rooted in their understanding of life as part of a greater, ongoing cycle. Perhaps we can take comfort in the idea that life doesn't just end, it continues in some form, and that our actions, our love, and our connections with others leave a lasting legacy. What do you think happens after we pass? Reflect quietly on your own beliefs as we end this section. How does the idea of life continuing in some form bring you comfort? ChatGPT said. The pyramids of ancient Egypt stand as majestic monuments to a civilization long past, towering over the landscape and casting long shadows across the sands. These colossal structures are the very embodiment of the grandeur and power of the pharaohs, and yet they are also symbols of the quiet, humble dedication of the countless workers who spent their lives constructing them. Today, when we stand before them, we are filled with awe and wonder, struck by the sheer magnitude and precision of these ancient marvels. But in their time, the pyramids were a part of everyday life, woven into the very fabric of Egyptian society. They were not just monuments to royalty, but to the hard work and quiet resilience of the common people who built them, often without recognition. Imagine walking through the hot, dry desert, your sandals crunching on the loose sand beneath your feet. In the distance, you see the first glimpse of the pyramid, a massive stone structure that rises like a mountain from the flat landscape. As you get closer, its sheer size becomes more and more overwhelming. The stone blocks, each one weighing several tons, are stacked one upon the other, so precisely that you can't even slide a piece of paper between them. The pyramid is solid, unwavering, its base broad and expansive, its peak reaching toward the heavens. It is a marvel of engineering, a feat of construction that seems impossible even by today's standards, yet as awe-inspiring as the pyramids are, they were also the result of simple, ordinary labor, the work of thousands of men and women. These workers, who toiled in the shadow of the Great Pyramid, were not the elite, nor were they the ones who commissioned these grand structures. Instead, they were farmers, craftsmen, laborers, ordinary people who dedicated their lives to the construction of something that would outlast them by millennia. The construction of the pyramids was not a singular, monumental event, but a process that unfolded over decades. It was a slow, deliberate task that required immense effort, careful planning, and an unwavering commitment to the task at hand. Most of the workers who built the pyramids were not slaves, as many assume. They were skilled laborers who worked in rotating shifts, leaving their homes in the rural areas to come to the pyramid sites during the off-season when the floodwaters of the Nile made farming impossible. These workers were well-fed and housed near the construction site, and their work, though demanding, was considered a vital service to the pharaoh and to the gods. For the Egyptians, building the pyramids was not just a physical task, it was a sacred endeavor. Each stone placed in the pyramid was a symbolic act, a tribute to the divine. The workers who took part in this monumental task saw themselves as playing a role in something far greater than themselves. As you imagine standing before the pyramids, you begin to understand that they were never just structures for the dead. They were part of the daily rhythm of life in ancient Egypt. The process of building the pyramids was intertwined with the very essence of the Egyptian worldview. The laborers who worked on the pyramids were not just building monuments to the pharaoh's power, they were constructing the very gateways to eternity. The pyramids were seen as a means to ensure the pharaoh's immortality, and by extension, the continued prosperity and stability of Egypt itself. The workers, too, were part of this divine plan. Their labor was seen as an offering to the gods, a means of securing their own place in the afterlife. The pyramid construction sites were bustling hubs of activity. Laborers would transport massive stones from quarries, hauling them across the desert on sleds or boats, depending on the location of the quarries and the Nile's seasonal flooding. The stones would then be lifted into place, one by one, using simple yet effective tools like ramps, levers, and pulleys. The air was thick with dust and the sounds of voices shouting orders. The rhythm of work carried out with a quiet determination. For these workers, each day was a repetition of the last long, hard hours spent laboring under the scorching sun. Yet there was also a sense of camaraderie among them as they worked side by side, united in their task. They would sing songs to keep time, and in their brief moments of rest, they would share stories, food, and drink. In the midst of their toil, they found moments of connection, of solidarity, and even joy. The pyramid itself, though a testament to the power and wealth of the pharaoh, was also a representation of the unity and collective effort of the Egyptian people. It was a structure that could not have been built by a single person or a small group of elites. It was the result of the dedication of thousands, a quiet, steady work that, over time, culminated in something extraordinary. The Egyptians understood that their greatest achievements were often built not by a few, but by the many working together, each contributing in their own small way to something much greater than themselves. When you stand before the pyramids today, it's easy to be overwhelmed by their scale, to focus on the grandeur of the ancient rulers who commissioned them, but it is equally important to remember the countless workers whose quiet, uncelebrated labor made these monuments possible. Without their dedication, the pyramids would not exist. The grandeur of the pyramids is a reflection not just of the power of the pharaohs, but of the hard work, sacrifice, and resilience of the ordinary people of Egypt. As you imagine standing before the pyramids, what do you feel? Is it awe, wonder, or something else? Reflect on the thousands of workers who built these majestic monuments, whose stories are hidden beneath the stones. They too are part of the pyramid's legacy, quietly laboring, faithfully contributing to something that would endure through the ages. What emotions does this evoke for you as you stand before such a lasting symbol of both human achievement and collective effort? The legacy of ancient Egypt is a quiet yet enduring influence that continues to shape our world today. From the grand structures that rise above the sands to the quiet wisdom embedded in their everyday practices, the people of Egypt have left an imprint on history that still resonates. Their contributions to architecture, medicine, religion, and culture are felt across the globe, a testament to the enduring strength and spiritual dedication of a civilization that flourished thousands of years ago. Perhaps one of the most immediate and awe-inspiring legacies of Egypt is its architecture. The pyramids, temples, and monuments that still stand today are not just marvels of engineering, but symbols of the Egyptian people's ability to create enduring structures. The ancient Egyptians were masters of design, their work blending art with practicality. The Great Pyramid of Giza, for example, is one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world, and it remains a source of awe and inspiration. The sheer scale and precision of these structures, built without modern technology, continue to intrigue architects and engineers alike. But the influence of Egyptian architecture extends beyond the pyramids. The use of columns, arches, and monumental gateways became fundamental in the architectural styles of later civilizations, including the Greeks and Romans, and continues to influence modern architecture today. In the realm of medicine, the ancient Egyptians were pioneers, laying the foundation for many practices we still use today. They understood the importance of hygiene, the medicinal properties of herbs, and the need for a holistic approach to health. The Egyptians performed surgeries, set broken bones, and developed early forms of dentistry. They were among the first to make use of papyrus to document medical knowledge, leaving behind detailed medical texts that are still studied by historians and medical professionals. Their methods of treating ailments, using natural remedies such as aloe vera and garlic, have been passed down through the centuries and are still in use in many cultures around the world. The influence of Egyptian religion and spiritual beliefs also endures. Their rich pantheon of gods and goddesses, their beliefs about the afterlife, and their rituals of worship laid the groundwork for many religious practices that came later. The idea of an afterlife, the notion that death is not an end but a transition, continues to shape the spiritual beliefs of many cultures today. Egyptian concepts of judgment in the afterlife, as seen in the weighing of the heart, influenced later religious ideas about morality, divine judgment, and the soul's journey. Even the practice of mummification, which sought to preserve the body for the afterlife, reflects the Egyptian view of the sacredness of life and death, an idea that resonates in many modern spiritual and religious practices. Egyptian culture, from their art to their social structures, has also left a lasting impact. The Egyptians were not only builders but also artists, leaving behind magnificent paintings, sculptures, and jewelry that continued to captivate us. The vibrant colors, the attention to detail, and the symbolism embedded in their artwork offer a window into their world, revealing their values, beliefs, and daily life. Egyptian art focused on order, symmetry, and the eternal, reflecting their spiritual devotion and their desire to create lasting images of beauty and power. The influence of Egyptian art can be seen in later artistic movements, from Greek and Roman art to the neoclassical revival in the 18th and 19th centuries. Perhaps most profound is the quiet perseverance that defined the Egyptian people. Their civilization endured for millennia, weathering invasions, political changes, and shifts in power. Yet the essence of Egyptian culture remained. The same quiet dedication that built the pyramids, the same spiritual devotion that guided their rituals, is the legacy they have left behind. It is a legacy that speaks to the strength of the human spirit, the ability to endure, to create, and to leave behind something that outlasts us all. As we look at the world around us today, we can still see the echoes of ancient Egypt. The influence of their architecture can be found in the buildings we walk through. The influence of their medicine is woven into the very fabric of modern healthcare. Their religious beliefs resonate in many spiritual traditions, and their culture continues to inspire us in art, literature, and philosophy. The quiet determination with which they built their monuments, their cities, and their lives serves as a reminder of the enduring power of human creativity and perseverance. Ancient Egypt's legacy endures. What part of their history do you find most fascinating? Share your thoughts with us. Tools in ancient Egypt. Music was not just a form of entertainment. It was a powerful force woven into the very fabric of daily life, from the grand ceremonies dedicated to the gods to the simple melodies shared around family hearths. Music was present in every moment. It was both sacred and secular, a way to connect with the divine and to unwind from the pressures of daily labor. The Egyptians believed that music had the power to heal, to inspire, and to carry the soul closer to the gods. In every note, in every beat, there was something that reached beyond the physical world. Imagine yourself walking through the bustling streets of an ancient Egyptian city. The air is filled with the sound of life, people talking, vendors selling their wares, children playing in the streets, but amidst it all, there's the soft hum of a melody carried on the wind. It's a sound that comes from a small group of musicians, perhaps gathered near a temple or a market, playing their instruments for the enjoyment of those around them. The sound of a flute can be heard, its high-pitched notes rising and falling in a delicate dance. The soft drums join in, adding a rhythmic heartbeat to the music. And, somewhere in the background, the gentle strumming of a harp completes the ensemble. The music doesn't demand attention, but it becomes part of the atmosphere, enriching the world around you and inviting you to pause for a moment of peace, of connection, and of joy. Music in ancient Egypt was both sacred and secular, bridging the gap between the divine and the earthly. In religious ceremonies, music played an essential role. The temples, with their towering columns and sacred air, were filled with the sounds of instruments played to honor the gods. The harp, revered for its soft, melodic tones, was often used in these ceremonies, its strings vibrating with the prayers of the people. The flute, too, was a prominent instrument in temple rituals, its sound believed to carry the worshipper's soul closer to the gods. Music, along with prayer, incense, and offerings, was part of the intricate tapestry of devotion that the Egyptians wove in their spiritual practices. The rituals and festivals held in honor of the gods were alive with sound, chants, and songs, filled the air as priests and worshippers alike came together to celebrate the divine. Music became a form of communication between humans and the gods, a way to show reverence and gratitude. In these sacred moments, the music was solemn, meditative, and uplifting, guiding the people's spirits toward the heavens. Each note, each chord played, was a step closer to divine presence, a moment of connection to the eternal. But music wasn't reserved only for the temples or sacred spaces. It was just as important in the everyday lives of the Egyptians. In homes, at parties, or during festivals, music served to bring people together, to lighten their spirits, and to mark the passage of time. Musicians would play lyres, lutes, and drums, creating an atmosphere of joy and celebration. Music was often an essential part of social gatherings, weddings, feasts, or gatherings after a hard day's work. The rhythm of a drum would keep people's feet moving, the music lulling them into a sense of relaxation and joy. while the melody of a flute could inspire light-hearted conversation and laughter. Music was a bonding force, creating shared experiences that united people across different walks of life. The Egyptians also believed that music had the power to heal and comfort. It was used in healing rituals, where melodies were believed to soothe physical pain and restore balance to the body and mind. Incantations and songs were chanted to cure illnesses, to protect against evil, or to call upon the gods for aid. Music, that had a sacred healing power, and it was deeply intertwined with the Egyptians' view of the body and spirit as interconnected that the instruments themselves were as varied as the music they created. Flutes, often made of wood or reeds, were one of the most common instruments in Egypt. Their sweet, airy tones could mimic the sounds of nature, from the soft rustle of the wind to the song of birds. The harp, a more elaborate instrument, was often associated with nobility and religious rites. It was used in both private and public performances and was often played at banquets and ceremonies. The drums provided rhythm and beat, and though they were often considered the instrument of common people, they were no less important. The sistrum, a percussion instrument that resembled a rattle, was commonly used in temple ceremonies. Its sound was said to invoke the goddess Hathor, bringing her presence into the space. Music was also a form of storytelling. In ancient Egypt, songs and hymns were used to pass down stories, traditions, and legends. These oral traditions were vital in preserving the culture's history as they were passed down from generation to generation, not only through spoken word but also through song. Music allowed the stories of gods, pharaohs, and daily life to live on, giving the people a means of understanding their world and their place within it. As you sit back and listen to the soft sounds of an Egyptian flute or the rhythmic beat of a drum, imagine how this music would have filled the air. Imagine the peace it could bring, the joy it could inspire, and the sacredness it could carry. Music was the heartbeat of ancient Egypt, a constant presence that lifted the spirit, connected people, and invited them to pause, to reflect, and to celebrate. As you imagine standing before the pyramids, what do you feel? Is it awe, wonder, or something else? Reflect on the role of music in these monumental moments of history. Let the rhythm of ancient Egypt fill your thoughts, and think about how music continues to shape the world today. What part of Egyptian music do you find most captivating? The Nile River was not just the lifeblood of ancient Egypt, it was the pulse that governed the rhythms of life, dictating the seasons of work, rest, and celebration. Each year, the Nile would flow through the land, following a natural cycle that became the foundation for everything in Egyptian society, from farming to festivals, and from daily routines to religious practices. The seasonal flooding, known as the inundation, brought both challenges and blessings, ensuring a cycle of renewal and growth that the Egyptians would come to rely on. Imagine standing by the riverbank, watching the waters slowly begin to rise. The Nile's annual inundation, which typically began in late summer, was the most important event of the year. As the waters swelled, they covered the fields, creating a blanket of life-giving silt. The inundation wasn't just a flood, it was a sign of fertility and renewal. It was as though the river itself was cleansing the earth, preparing it for a new cycle of growth. The Egyptians celebrated this event with the Feast of the Inundation, a time of joy and thanksgiving for the abundance the flood would bring. The rising waters signaled that life would continue, that the harvest would be plentiful, and that the gods had once again blessed the land. For the Egyptians, the inundation was a time of hope. As the water receded, it left behind rich, fertile soil, ready to be tilled and planted. This time of the year was marked by preparation for the planting season. Farmers, having waited through the scorching heat of the dry season, now had a chance to work the land. Fields were plowed, seeds were sown, and the early stages of cultivation began. The annual flooding ensured that crops such as wheat, barley, and flax could grow, feeding the population and sustaining the kingdom. The flood was nature's guarantee that the cycle of life would continue year after year. The farmers and workers didn't work alone, however. The Nile wasn't just a source of irrigation, it was also a way of life. Boats laden with grain, cattle, and other goods would drift down the river, providing transportation for both the people and their goods. The flow of the river during the inundation made travel easier, allowing people to move between cities, bringing supplies to those in need. The river was as much a part of their daily existence as the land itself, and each season of the Nile was marked by a different rhythm of activity. When the dry season arrived, and the Nile waters receded, it brought its own set of challenges. The fertile silt left behind was no longer submerged, and the land required tending, but the work during this season was harder. The farmers focused on weeding and maintaining their crops. They also had to ensure the irrigation channels were well maintained so that the crops continued to receive the water they needed. This was a time of diligence and maintenance, where the steady rhythm of labor continued as they prepared for the harvest season. As the dry season progressed, people would find ways to relax and recharge. Though the work never truly stopped, the Egyptians would take time to rest and celebrate as they waited for the harvest. The change in seasons also marked the annual festivals that would honor the gods who governed the cycles of the river. Temples and shrines would be filled with offerings, and the community would come together to give thanks for the bounty they expected to receive. The Shemu season, the third season, would bring the harvest. It was a time for feasts, celebrations, and the sharing of the fruits of the labor. Music, dancing, and food would fill the air, and families would gather to celebrate the abundance of the land. These festivals were not just social events, they were spiritual moments, where the people acknowledged the divine forces that ensured the success of the crops. As the Egyptians reflected on the river's annual cycle, they saw it as a microcosm of life itself, a process of death and rebirth, of challenge and triumph. The Nile represented the cycle of renewal, offering both nourishment and difficulty, but always ensuring that life would continue. The ancient Egyptians recognized that just as the river's flow controlled the seasons, it also governed their own lives, sometimes calm, sometimes turbulent, but always moving forward. The Nile was a reminder that life, like the river, would continue to ebb and flow, bringing both growth and challenge, yet always carrying them toward the future. In this way, the seasons of the Nile were more than just a backdrop for farming, they were the heartbeat of Egyptian life. The rhythm of the flood, the planting, the growth and the harvest were ingrained into the daily lives of every Egyptian. These cycles shaped their work, their celebrations, and their spirituality, creating a deep connection between the land, the people, and the gods who governed them. As you reflect on the seasons of the Nile, imagine the anticipation that must have filled the air each year. The Egyptians waited for the flood with bated breath, hoping for a bountiful harvest, for prosperity, and for a life well lived. What would it have been like to live in such a deep relationship with the river? What do you think life would have felt like, knowing that each year the river would bring both challenges and blessings? Ancient Egypt's relationship with the Nile was the foundation for everything. It was a cycle that shaped the people's lives, their traditions, and their connection to the divine. The Nile's seasons governed everything: life, work, and even death itself. ChatGPT said, in ancient Egypt, life was a delicate balance of the spiritual and the earthly, where the sacred was interwoven with the ordinary. The Egyptians understood that every moment, no matter how small, was an opportunity to connect with the divine. They believed that daily rituals, both simple and profound, helped maintain harmony between the physical world and the spiritual realm. These rituals weren't just ceremonial, they were woven into the very fabric of everyday life, helping people stay grounded, maintain balance, and seek protection from the gods. Imagine waking in the soft light of the morning, the air cool and still. The first moments of the day were sacred, and many Egyptians began their mornings with a prayer or offering. It wasn't necessarily a grand, formal ceremony, but a simple, heartfelt acknowledgement of the gods. Perhaps a woman would light a small candle or burn incense in a corner of her home, offering her thanks for another day of life. The scent of the incense would slowly fill the room, curling upwards like a prayer. A small statue or image of a god would sit quietly in the corner, receiving the offerings of food, drink, or incense. These daily acts were not just ritualistic, they were deeply personal, connecting the individual to the divine forces that governed the world. On the kitchen, the morning rituals continued. Before a meal was eaten, the Egyptians would often offer a portion of their food to the gods. This wasn't just a gesture of reverence, it was an act of gratitude. Whether it was a piece of bread, a bowl of fruit, or a small offering of wine, these gifts were given in the belief that the gods needed to be nourished, just as the people did. This connection between the divine and the daily needs of the people was deeply embedded in Egyptian life. It was a way of ensuring that they would remain in favor with the gods, that they would receive protection, health, and prosperity. Beyond the home, public rituals also marked the beginning of the day. In temples, priests would rise early to perform sacred duties. They would enter the temple's inner sanctum, where statues of the gods resided, and offer prayers and incense to honor them. The rituals in the temple were far more elaborate than those in the home, often involving chanting, music, and the presentation of gifts. But they had the same purpose: to maintain the connection between the people and the gods. These acts weren't just about appeasing the divine. They were about living in harmony with the natural world and ensuring that peace and balance remained intact throughout the day. Egyptians continued to practice small, sacred rituals that brought meaning to their daily tasks. Farmers would pause before working the fields to offer a prayer to Hapi, the god of the Nile, asking for a bountiful harvest. Craftsmen, before beginning their work, might dedicate their efforts to the gods of creation, offering a silent prayer that their work would be of value to the community. These quiet moments of devotion, though often unnoticed by others, were deeply significant. In the repetitive, everyday work, they found meaning, connection, and balance. When the sun began to set, the day would end with more rituals of reflection and gratitude. The evening meal would be shared with family, but before eating, a prayer would be said. A small offering of bread or drink might be placed on an altar, as a final act of reverence, acknowledging that their food was not only the result of their own work, but also a gift from the gods. The rhythm of these rituals helped Egyptians stay centered, reminded them of their place in the world. and helped them recognize that every action they took was part of a greater spiritual purpose. Even in the simplest of activities, the Egyptians found ways to infuse their daily lives with sacred meaning. These daily rituals helped them maintain balance in a world that was often harsh and unpredictable. They knew that the gods were always present, and through their rituals, they maintained their connection to the divine forces that shaped their existence. This sacredness wasn't reserved for grand ceremonies or special occasions. It was part of every moment. For the Egyptians, these rituals were not about seeking favor or wealth. They were about peace in the heart, peace with the world, and peace with the gods. They believed that living in balance with the divine order was the key to a good and prosperous life. Through their offerings, prayers, and daily acts of devotion, they kept the rhythms of life aligned with the forces that governed the cosmos. These rituals weren't just acts of duty. They were acts of gratitude, acknowledging that every breath, every meal, every moment was a gift from the gods. The Egyptians knew that the sacredness of life was found in the small moments: the morning prayer, the simple offering of food, the act of devotion woven into everyday tasks. These moments brought peace, balance, and connection to the divine, making every part of life meaningful. The sacredness of their rituals allowed them to move through the world with intention, to find peace in their hearts, and to live each day with purpose. In ancient Egypt, writing was not merely a tool for communication, it was a vital bridge between the earthly world and the divine, a means of preserving knowledge, culture, and history. The Egyptians believed that words, once written, had power. They could invoke the gods, record the deeds of kings, and pass on wisdom to future generations. Through their complex system of hieroglyphs, papyrus scrolls, and other forms of writing, the Egyptians created a rich literary tradition that would influence the course of history for millennia. Imagine yourself in the presence of a scribe, sitting at his small wooden desk, carefully inscribing symbols onto a sheet of papyrus with a reed pen. The room is quiet except for the rhythmic sound of the pen gliding across the paper. The scribe is one of the most respected members of Egyptian society, for he holds the key to a vast treasure of knowledge. It is through his work that Egypt's history, religion, and daily affairs are recorded and preserved. The scribes were the keepers of wisdom, entrusted with recording everything from the reigns of pharaohs to the stories of gods and myths. Their work was sacred, as they believed that writing could influence the future, shape the world, and connect people to the divine. Hieroglyphs, the intricate system of picture-based writing, were the heart of Egyptian writing. Each symbol represented an object, idea, or sound, and these symbols were arranged in both vertical and horizontal lines to form sentences. It was a system that combined art and communication, turning writing into a form of visual beauty. Hieroglyphs were used primarily for monumental inscriptions on the walls of temples, tombs, and pyramids. These inscriptions immortalized the names of pharaohs, recorded important events, and invoked the blessings of the gods. The walls of the Great Pyramid of Giza, for instance, are covered in hieroglyphs that describe the pharaoh's deeds, ensuring that his legacy would endure long after his death. But hieroglyphs weren't only used for grand public purposes. The Egyptians also developed a more practical form of writing, using papyrus scrolls to document daily life, trade, and administration. Papyrus was a versatile material, made from the papyrus plant that grew along the banks of the Nile, and it became the primary medium for writing. The scribes would use ink made from soot or other natural materials, writing on the smooth surface of papyrus scrolls with incredible precision. These scrolls were used for everything from legal documents and tax records to letters, contracts, and personal correspondence. In fact, some of the earliest surviving examples of written language are private letters and administrative texts written by ordinary people, reminders, requests, and transactions, all preserved in ink on papyrus. Writing in Egypt wasn't just about recording facts. It was also about preserving religion and spiritual knowledge. The Egyptians created a vast body of religious texts, many of which were written on papyrus and buried with the dead in their tombs. The Book of the Dead, a famous text that outlined the journey of the soul through the afterlife, was one of the most important spiritual works to be recorded. These texts were meant to guide the deceased through the trials of the afterlife, ensuring that they would be judged favorably by the gods and granted eternal life. Writing, in this case, became a bridge between life and death, connecting the living with the spiritual realm. Scribes played a central role in this process. They were educated in the art of writing, often learning from an early age in specialized schools. The training was rigorous, requiring years of study to master the thousands of symbols used in Egyptian writing. Only a small percentage of the population could read and write, making the scribe a highly valued member of society. They worked for the government, the temples, and the pharaohs, and their skill gave them a position of both prestige and responsibility. Without them, much of Egyptian society, its laws, records, and history would not have been preserved. The art of writing was also essential for preserving culture. Stories of the gods and myths, as well as the teachings of the pharaohs, were passed down through generations via written texts. The great myths of the creation of the world, the stories of Osiris and Isis, and the divine deeds of the pharaohs were all recorded in writing, ensuring that these traditions would continue. Literature too was an important part of Egyptian culture, with wisdom literature, poems, and stories recorded for the benefit of future generations. These writings not only entertained but also offered moral guidance and reflections on life. Writing, therefore, was more than just a means of communication in ancient Egypt. It was a sacred tool. It allowed the Egyptians to preserve their knowledge, share their wisdom, and connect with the divine. The sacred texts and monumental inscriptions they left behind continue to speak to us today, offering a window into their world. They remind us of the power of words, the ability of writing to shape history, and the enduring legacy of a civilization that believed that the written word could influence both the living and the dead. As you reflect on the profound role of writing in ancient Egypt, think about the ways in which writing continues to shape our world. What would our lives be like without the written word? The Egyptians, through their careful documentation of their lives, left behind a rich record of their history, culture, and beliefs. Their dedication to preserving knowledge ensures that their civilization is still felt today. Ancient Egypt's legacy endures. What part of their history do you find most fascinating? Share your thoughts with us. The pharaohs of ancient Egypt were not simply kings or rulers. They were seen as the living gods on earth, the divine intermediaries between the gods and the people. Their role was both political and spiritual, a complex balance that shaped every aspect of Egyptian society. The pharaohs were responsible not only for governing the land, maintaining law and order, and leading their people through times of peace and war, but also for ensuring that the divine forces were honored and that the cosmic balance and order, was upheld. To the Egyptians, the pharaoh was the very embodiment of divinity in human form. Imagine the scene. A pharaoh, draped in elaborate garments and adorned with gold jewelry, stands before his people, radiating a presence that commands both awe and respect. On his head, he wears the double crown, the white crown of Upper Egypt and the red crown of Lower Egypt, symbolizing his dominion over all of Egypt. As the leader of both the physical and spiritual realms, he is not just a ruler but a god incarnate, the earthly manifestation of Horus, the god of kingship, or Ra, the sun god. Depending on the era and the pharaoh's association with the divine, the pharaoh's responsibility was profound and far-reaching. He was tasked with maintaining the delicate balance between order and chaos, justice and injustice, and truth and falsehood. This responsibility was not just a ceremonial title. It was a critical duty. That pharaoh had to ensure that the Nile flooded at the right time, that the harvests were plentiful, and that the kingdom was protected from foreign invaders. He was also responsible for ensuring that the gods were kept pleased through rituals, offerings, and maintaining harmony within the kingdom. His role was, therefore, not just about governance but about preserving cosmic balance, ensuring that both the physical and spiritual worlds remained in harmony. The pharaoh was seen as the ultimate judge and lawgiver, ensuring justice and order in all matters, whether it was through religious decrees, the regulation of trade, or the enforcement of laws. He was the protector of the people, responsible for the well-being of the country and for the protection of its lands and people. Whether in times of peace or war, the pharaoh stood as a central figure who unified the people under one divine banner, ensuring that Egypt remained prosperous, secure, and strong. When they went into battle, the pharaoh's presence inspired his troops, for it was believed that the pharaoh was backed by the gods, fighting alongside them beyond the physical and political realms. The pharaoh's role was deeply intertwined with religion. The pharaoh was seen as the son of Ra, the sun god, and the divine ruler who would ensure Egypt's stability. He was often depicted in temple reliefs offering prayers to the gods, and in many ways, he was the link between the people and the divine. Every major temple and ritual was centered around the pharaoh's divine authority, and his acts of devotion were believed to maintain Egypt's prosperity. The pharaoh's reign also played a significant role in shaping Egypt's cultural identity. From the grand monuments he commissioned to the temples and pyramids that dotted the Egyptian landscape, the pharaoh left a lasting mark on the kingdom. The pyramids, in particular, were more than just tombs. They were monumental symbols of the pharaoh's eternal connection with the gods. These massive structures were built to honor the pharaoh in death, ensuring his immortality and his continued influence in the afterlife. The construction of such monumental architecture demonstrated the pharaoh's power, wealth, and divine mandate to create lasting legacies. The culture of ancient Egypt, in fact, revolved around the idea of the pharaoh as a living god. Art, literature, and everyday life were shaped by his divine status. Even the writing of the time was filled with reverence for the pharaoh's power. Hymns, poetry, and historical records all spoke of the pharaoh's victories and his divine wisdom, emphasizing his central role in maintaining the balance of life. However, the pharaoh's influence didn't end with his death. Much like the pyramids that stood as monuments to his legacy, the pharaoh's memory and influence lived on after his reign. Mummification, the careful preservation of the pharaoh's body, was part of a grand process to ensure his immortality. The spirit was believed to live on, and his actions in life would dictate his fate in the afterlife. Temples and monuments were built to honor him, and offerings would be made at his tomb to ensure that his spirit remained strong in the afterlife. Continuing to watch over Egypt, the pharaoh's reign shaped the very identity of Egypt, both during his life and long after his death. He was both a political leader and a divine figure, a living god whose actions determined the course of Egypt's future. The legacy of the pharaohs endures in the grand structures they left behind, the art that celebrates their divine authority, and the religious practices that still echo their influence. As you imagine standing in the shadow of the pharaohs, what do you feel? Is it awe, wonder, or something else? How would it have felt to live in a world where the king was not only a ruler of men but also a direct link to the divine? Reflect on the pharaohs' profound influence on the culture, religion, and history of Egypt. Of the common people of ancient Egypt, though often overshadowed by the grandeur of the pharaohs and the elite, formed the backbone of the society. They were the farmers, laborers, craftsmen, and traders who worked tirelessly day after day, carrying the weight of Egypt's prosperity on their shoulders. Their lives were marked by hard work and modest living, yet they found meaning and purpose in the everyday rituals and responsibilities that connected them to both the land and the divine. Imagine waking up at dawn, the air still cool but already beginning to heat up. The sun rises over the horizon, casting a golden glow on the flat, vast landscape of Egypt. As a farmer, your day begins early, just as it did for your ancestors. You and your family gather your tools, perhaps a hoe or a sickle, and head to the fields along the Nile. The floodwaters have receded, leaving behind rich, fertile silt that needs to be worked. The labor is hard, backbreaking even, but it is a rhythm you know well. The Nile provides, and with it the hope of a bountiful harvest. As you work the land, you and your fellow laborers offer quiet prayers to Hapi, the god of the Nile, asking for good flooding and an abundant crop. These moments of devotion, though simple, are sacred. They connect you not only to the land but to the gods who govern it. This relationship with the divine is not just for the temples, it's part of the very fabric of everyday life. The gods are always present, guiding your hands as you sow the seeds of wheat or barley. Through hard work and faith, you play your part in the cycle of life, death, and renewal that has sustained Egypt for centuries. At the end of the workday, you return home to your modest dwelling, made of mud brick. Your home is small but comfortable. It's a place where your family comes together after a long day's work. The evenings are filled with the sounds of children playing, meals being prepared, and the soft conversation of parents. Reflecting on the day's labor, you sit down to eat a simple meal, perhaps bread, onions, and a little fish from the Nile, and offer thanks for the food you have. Despite the hardships, there's a deep sense of gratitude for the small joys, the warmth of the home, the company of loved ones, and the peace that comes with the quiet rhythms of family life. The Egyptians, even in their simplest of lives, understood the importance of family and community. Family was the foundation of Egyptian society, and the nuclear family was the basic unit of social structure. Children were cherished, and they learned the value of work and faith early. As a parent, you instill in them the same values that have been passed down for generations. The importance of hard work, of living in harmony with the land and the gods, and of honoring one's ancestors. Even the laborers who built the grand structures of Egypt, from the pyramids to the temples, found meaning in their work. Though the work was grueling, it was also seen as a sacred duty. They weren't just laying stones, they were contributing to something eternal, something that connected them to the gods and to the afterlife. The very act of laboring to build monuments for the pharaohs was an offering to the divine, and in this offering they found purpose and a deep sense of pride. The workers who built the pyramids didn't see their labor as menial. They saw it as a vital contribution to Egypt's lasting legacy, a connection to both the physical and spiritual worlds. In addition to their hard work, the common people of Egypt had their own forms of leisure and celebration. Festivals were a regular part of life, tied to both the Nile's flooding cycle and religious observances. These festivals were times of rest, music, dance, and community. Whether it was a festival to honor Ra, the sun god, or a harvest celebration, marking the end of the planting season, these communal events offered the common people a chance to pause, to relax, and to come together. They might gather around a fire singing songs, sharing food, and enjoying the companionship of their neighbors. These moments of joy were deeply rooted in a spiritual context, as they acknowledged the blessings of the gods and celebrated the cycles of life. Despite the challenges they faced, the common people of Egypt lived with a quiet strength that resonated through their daily lives. Their work, though demanding, was imbued with purpose. They knew their role in society, and they understood the connection between their efforts and the prosperity of Egypt as a whole. Through their labor in the fields, in the workshops, and in their homes, they contributed to a society that was built on balance, order, and divine favor. They were the foundation of Egypt's greatness, the ones who made it all possible, though their names might never be written in the grand hieroglyphs of temples or tombs. Their quiet perseverance and ability to find joy in the everyday are a testament to their resilience. In their hard work, they embodied the spirit of Egypt, diligent, devout, and connected to the land and the divine. They were the heartbeat of a civilization that thrived for millennia, and their legacy lives on in the strength and stability they brought to Egypt. Reflecting on the daily lives of these common people, what do you find most moving? Despite their struggles, they found purpose, joy, and connection. What do you think would be the most fulfilling part of such a life? Share your thoughts with us.